Good morning. How are you, Dr. Z?
Hi, good morning. I'm doing well and I'm happy to be here.
Appreciate it so much. We've started this series for We Got This within the podcast and content so that we're adding more and more resources to our community through our website, through socials. And definitely a lot of the burning questions right now revolve around nutrition. And so we knew you were our gal and so excited to dive in. Would love if you wouldn't mind starting out just kind of letting everyone know about a little bit about you and your practice. I know I really enjoyed getting to utilize your services as well. So I know our audience will be happy to hear it.
Great. Yeah. So my name's Krystle Zuniga. I am in Austin, Texas. I have my PhD in nutritional sciences. I'm also a registered dietitian that's board certified in oncology nutrition. So I've been posting on social media to help bring some evidence based resources out. You can find me at Cancer Nutrition HQ. I also just launched my own podcast recently. So I go into depth with some very common questions that people have. And I do see patients one on one through my private practice, supporting individuals going through and after recovering from cancer.
Love it. And I have to say, from my own personal use experience, I'd been following you for so long on social media since having, metastatic breast cancer myself and always loved your information, all that. And I reached out just assuming that like I'd have to, pay out of pocket for the session. It turned out my insurance covered it. So that was really exciting and good for people to know that, they can do that remote. So I'm a walking testimonial over here.
Oh, awesome. Yes, thank you. I am in network with some insurance, and I took the time to do that because I'm sure this is something you discuss in your community of like the financial toxicity of cancer. And I say take advantage of anything that insurance will cover that's going to support your healing.
It honestly means a lot that you did take the time to do that, and I totally understand some physicians just, like, not being able to, particularly here in LA where I live, with practices in person, I know with rents and all these things, it's, like, really hard to sustain, but it is really tough as a patient to be paying out of pocket for the things that we really, should know about. Like, our nutrition is just as important as all the other aspects to our cancer treatment, and I'm just so grateful to have had the benefit personally, and now we get to open it up to the We Got This community. So let's dive right in. We were messaging about things I think before booking this time too. So I have like so many things on the back burner of stuff that you've posted, and then some other things, that pop up as well. With 4 years being in cancer treatment myself, you hear it all, and then being on 5 different lines of treatment, it's like, depending on the treatment, things that sound healthy or were good previously might be really dangerous, and so I'm excited to dive into all that. I thought we'd kick it off just we're in a time of a lot of misconceptions, some misrepresentation, and, maybe give you the floor a little bit on what you're seeing online right now when it comes to nutrition or supplements for cancer survivors, thrivers, current patients, and we'll dive in from there.
Yeah. So, social media, I've really appreciated that it's been an opportunity for people to have greater access to information. But unfortunately, it also makes it a lot more challenging to vet out what is good information. And I understand that people are looking for this information. There's actually been some research of surveying cancer survivors and them saying that they did not feel like they got enough information from their providers about nutrition or physical activity and that they are utilizing these other resources for that. But again, cancer is very complicated. And I think people are looking for simple answers, want yes, no, what do I need to eat? What do I need to avoid? And it really needs to be individualized, as you alluded to earlier. So, unfortunately, what I'm seeing is people are very confused because they're hearing, oh, this is good. And now this person is saying this is bad. No one's accommodating for your particular situation. So what I'm seeing is a lot in my practice is people just completely overwhelmed. Like there's so much information, much of it is conflicting. And so then they don't feel like they know what to do. And with that comes a lot of fear because they feel like what they're doing might be wrong. So again, I've I got on social media because it said this is a great avenue to reach people, but unfortunately, these more nuanced pieces of information or going more into depth on things doesn't go as viral. And what people are more likely to see is a very simple, outlandish, quite frankly, information, and that gets circulated and kind of feels like, well, if I'm seeing this a lot and a lot of people are saying this, then it must be true. So, kind of to sum that up, what I'm seeing is overwhelm and fear coming from a lot of that overwhelm.
Absolutely. And I empathize and understand it because I think about all the time with like people wanting there to be a single cure for all cancers, or these things that I wouldn't have understood before having cancer myself. And you have loved ones who are going through it, or you've lost loved ones, or you're going through it yourself, and you want so bad to just have answers. And so I don't blame people for gravitating to grasping on to the thing that makes the most sense to them or seems like, okay, I don't have time to figure this all out. But it's scary, and it's not a one size fits all like most things in medicine, but especially in the nutrition piece. I'm excited that we're talking about it. And along those lines, I mean, how do we kind of know the difference between well-studied, evidence-based recommendations and, things that might be more misleading?
Yeah, it's so easy to just scroll, catch something, and scroll to the next and scroll to the next. So if you're going to take the time, I went on a rant on this one time. It's like if you're going to take the
Yeah,
time to consume this information, take the time to check if this information is correct. If you're going to consume the information and then try to act on this information, take that extra step to see, are there actual references for what this person said? Are they citing any research about this? Because if they're not, then that's a big red flag. And kind of looking through their content, if they're constantly kind of doing that, or their information seems to conflict with what your providers or other professionals are saying, then that's a big red flag. So do take that extra time. This is your health. I know a lot of people, after they get treatment, they're going online to try to know more about the medication and how it's going to work and the side effects and really spend time trying to understand their therapies, but then are consuming information about nutrition or physical activity or supplements without putting in as much research. So, can take that time. It is your health. Um, and so, if they are citing information, check that it's actually information or studies that were done in humans. A
that's what I
lot of
was just thinking too.
yeah, that's a lot of the clickbait stuff and where a lot of people get confused. Like this thing, a popular one that was just going viral was bee venom treating cancer that was never done in humans. Or this compound killed all these cancer cells. It was done in a petri dish. Right? So we can't extrapolate what was done in cell culture or in animal models to what would happen in humans. Right? A lot of things can kill cells in a petri dish, but what is actually going to be safe and tolerated in a complex human is very different. Can always see it. Are they citing this information? If they are, you could look at the title of that information and say, oh, is this actually a study that was done in humans? If not, that's interesting research that we might build upon, but it's not at the level where you need to start acting upon something.
Yes, and to, the dozens of well-meaning friends and family who forwarded me the bee venom article and things like that. I think it's important for them to hear this too because it's coming from such a good place. Like I said earlier, we want these answers, and it's exciting to hear that promise. But there is a lot of promise. Like there is a lot of information we do have that we don't need to necessarily be grasping at straws for things that feel like a miracle or other stuff, right? Like, so what are some of like the most, productive examples of nutrition maybe like in some of your patients?
Yeah, that's a great point there. Is like we don't need to be grasping at these little things because
Yeah.
we're focusing on the foundations where there is strong evidence. So one of the best resources I direct individuals to is the American Institute for Cancer Research. They're part of the World Cancer Research Fund International, which is a nonprofit organization that gathers the evidence, has experts review it, looks at the strength of the evidence to see what are lifestyle factors that could potentially influence the risk of cancer. So these are great resources to fall back on because that's what our resources are, what our recommendations are going to be coming from is the body of research, not just one study. Um, how has this changed over time? How good are these studies? Does this actually make sense mechanistically that this would work that way? So, really having experts evaluate that research and come up with these strong evidence based recommendations. The American Cancer Society also has their own set of recommendations, which just strongly align with AICR's recommendations as well. So, we really have solid research to recommend things like eating a whole foods, plant forward diet. So that means limited in processed foods, limited in sugar sweetened beverages, avoiding alcohol, being physically active. I know it sounds like a very boring message that a lot of people don't like to hear. It's like, well, can it really be that simple? Like, I think
Yeah.
it's exciting that it is kind of that. Although that sounds simple, it's not easy to do. So that's what we really need to focus on is how can you best implement these foundational messages and recommendations.
I love that. You posted something recently along the lines of that, like, food isn't medicine alone, or, and I loved that. If you wouldn't mind kind of talking a bit about that and the post that you made, because it's a lot of times I say to people like, yeah, maybe being positive isn't going to cure my cancer, or or like eating healthy isn't going to cure my cancer, but like that doesn't mean it's not super important.
Yeah, when I did that post, there was a lot of pushback on that comment. So like, well, then you're saying that nutrition isn't doing anything? No, read the whole post. What I started with is food is not medicine, and that food is not going to be a replacement for your conventional treatments, and that nutrition is a powerful tool. And to really respect the power of nutrition, you need to respect what it can and cannot do. So we can respect that it's something that can help support your muscle mass, your immune function, your cognitive function. Like, yes, it's very powerful, but it's not going to treat your cancer. And that this is something that we need to consider in the whole part of what supports your health, like your mental health, as you alluded to there, your physical activity, your access to health care. These are all things that also impact health outcomes. So it's not just nutrition. And I understand like food as medicine is kind of a growing term that's being used. And I have some mixed feelings about it because really what we're trying to say is food is something that should be alongside conventional treatments, not that food being a replacement for our therapies.
Yeah, the statement itself still, I think, aligns that idea, but everyone kinda takes it a bit in the wrong direction and again, it's because I think we just want so much to have some of those answers, and wouldn't that be great if I could, not have to do chemo for the past 4 years and indefinitely moving forward and just change my nutrition? But yeah, I can't do that alone, but I need to do that alongside it, and that's why it's so important to talk to people like you.
Yeah, and
Um
to not fall into the conspiracies that no, that it's not being talked about because they want to make money off of therapies. In fact, there's a very active area of research that is trying to use specific diets with targeted therapies and do things in combination. So to know it's not being ignored. The power of nutrition is recognized and is being studied alongside therapies to see how we can really maximize the benefit of both. So it's not a conspiracy, it is an active area of research.
I have to pause on quick just to piggyback off of that because when people say things like that, there's a big difference between some of the gripes with like insurance or big pharma or doctors. And it's so interesting. I think about whenever people say something like that, I think about like you. I think about my oncologist. Like these people who are dedicating their lives to like truly helping people, and you're not getting the paydays that these influencers are, getting paid crazy amounts to promote things that are bogus, right? Like people look at it so black and white, and I think if you kinda go back to, like, common sense of what feels right, kinda like the studies that you see, like, if something sounds a bit too good to be true and you've never heard about bee venom curing cancer before, like, maybe just do a little bit more digging on, like, where in the process that is. But, the last person who I think is trying to, exploit us is the one who's taking the time to get covered by our insurance and make sure that we're doing the right things and understanding the right stuff. So, that's just been something weighing on me for a while,
I
yeah.
really appreciate that. Yeah, I went on a rant on that one time too. It's like, you think all these people, all these oncologists and people working in oncology would be trying to hide the cure. They have individuals who they care about that are going to be impacted by cancer, right? So really, we're not we want to do the best for our patients, and we're trying to keep up with the research and offer as much as we can based on the state of the evidence.
Definitely. And to that point, say we did have cures for all cancers, because I think when people say a cure for cancer, it's like the most ridiculous, uneducated statement because it's just that's just, I don't think ever going to be the case. Like, people don't even realize how many different types of breast cancer there are.
Mhm.
But like, if our doctors didn't, were out of a job specific to cancer, all the schooling and education and how smart you all are, I'm pretty confident that you will find another career path within medicine to make sense.
Oh,
So,
100%.
yeah,
Cardiovascular disease, still number one killer in the US. So plenty of resources can be dedicated there. And as we know, like actually in this country, we are under staffed and resourced of healthcare providers for the needs of this population.
absolutely. Awesome. Well, so, okay, there is a question coming in that's a personal, selfish one that I think other people can relate to. Is when I first got diagnosed, so I just celebrated my 4-year cancer anniversary. It was July 2021. And I was afraid, like, everything was trying to murder me, particularly, food, plastics, water was the big one that I spent, like, so much time researching, like podcasts, articles, calling dietitians I trusted, and I spent a lot of time trying to understand alkaline because so many people were swearing by it and recommending it. I won't spoil what I ultimately found, but I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about this of, like, the ideas on alkalinity, and then also, like, alkaline water. There's, like, these systems that are, like, $5,000, and, hey, if there was a $5,000 system that would cure my cancer, hey, I'm for it, but I don't know. Well, if you don't mind taking it away from there, this took up a lot of brain space, a lot of energy, a lot of time for me leading off.
Yeah, this is such a common question. Actually, I'm working on a whole podcast episode on this, so very fresh on
Awesome.
my mind. Yeah, the theory here is that cancer thrives in a acidic environment. So if you follow an alkaline diet, then cancer can't survive. Right. This was based on an old hypothesis when they actually burned food and they would measure the pH of the ash and notice that some foods had an acidic residue, some had an alkaline residue. And this was the early 1900s. So, not a lot, no, not where we are now. And they assumed that's what was happening in the body. If you ate these foods, that would change the pH of your body. Well, now we know that is not true, right? Our body regulates our pH in a very narrow range, 7.35 to 7.45. So just to see how tight that range is. So it's regulated by our lungs, by breathing out carbon dioxide. Our kidneys can filter excess acid, our bases, so that we stay in that tight range regardless of what you eat. And that is a good thing because acidosis or alkalosis are metabolic emergencies, health emergencies, and you need to be in a hospital to get that treated. And kind of an interesting backstory of that was an old hypothesis, but then it got really popular from this naturopath who started promoting these alkaline therapies as treatment for cancer. Who's not a doctor, um, was treating people with IVs of baking soda, getting people to not do conventional treatments and do his alternative treatments. He ended up getting sentenced to prison for acting without, as a doctor without a medical license. He was also sued in a civil lawsuit and was ordered to pay millions because that person with stage one breast cancer did not do conventional treatment because he set himself out to be a doctor and was prescribing this therapy, and her cancer did progress to stage four. So all this kind of little backstory here is that some old hypothesis turned into this great marketing opportunity for this guy who later was found to be a total fraud.
How
Um,
long ago was it that that happened? Because it did feel like this was, like, fairly recent in the past, like,
yeah, it
5
actually happened in California. He got tried in California.
uh,
It
that
was
tracks.
2017 was when he first got sentenced, and he was released, and he got sentenced again for a different type of fraud. So he's back in trouble by doing, grifters are going to grift,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But when we look at that, so the alkaline diet was saying, well, it's a diet that's limited in animal products, rich in fruits and vegetables. I'm like, that's not a bad thing when you look at
Mhm.
that. But the premise of it is incorrect because we cannot change our body's pH with our nutrition, with water. Um, think about what happens. You consume it and it lands in a pit of acid. Your stomach is full of acid. So, yes, our pH can fluctuate, but then it gets adjusted through our regulators of our lungs and our kidney.
So is pH in alkaline water in general just a marketing thing? Like, is there any benefit to drinking it?
Sure. So with alkaline waters, sometimes they add minerals like magnesium and calcium, which does change the pH of the water. So it might have a little bit more minerals. There are some really alkaline waters that add a lot of magnesium, and magnesium can actually have a laxative effect. So it might help with people's having more bowel movements. Or if you've ever taken like a Tums or milk of magnesia, those are also um, alkaline and you consume it and it neutralizes the acid. So that can help if you've got reflux, but just temporarily, it's going to impact your stomach pH. So there's really, again, just a little extra minerals in there. Some people like the taste of the mineral water. And if
Mhm.
it helps you drink your water, then that's a benefit. But no, it doesn't significantly change any health outcomes.
Okay. Could it hurt you? Like, could only drinking alkaline water be bad for you?
Oh, good question. I mean, you'd have to drink quite a large amount. I mean, really, the alkaline waters that I've seen promoted are somewhere around the pH of 9 or 10, so not super alkaline. Just thinking of, we wouldn't recommend someone taking Tums all the time because you actually need acid in that stomach
Yeah.
to break down proteins, to release minerals from food. So you don't want to neutralize your acid in your stomach too much because that could impact digestion.
Great. Well, so that's exactly where I ended up. And I have to say, early on, and I'm fortunate, especially being in LA, a lot of my friends are, are great people like you, studying nutrition and have real licenses and all these things. And between asking, my oncologist, dietitians, like both in like a functional, holistic, all of them agreed that like, all of them said what you said, basically. So, I found that, definitive for me, and then what I did end up falling with is I got a reverse osmosis water with remineralization, which was only a few $100s, and the water just tastes really good too. Is there any benefit to doing that other than the water tasting good, or
Yeah, and that is something that we can try to minimize our exposures to things that we can't unfortunately fix the pollution in our environment. You live in a urban area, as do I, and yeah, there's bad pollution days. We can just try to minimize our risk there, but also thinking about water, that could be a way that you can help filter out some of the potential contaminants. The contaminants are going to be different depending on where you live, the water supplies. And that can just be an extra way that you're trying to minimize your exposure to pollutants in there. So, yes, I have a water filter in my home. It tastes better. And yeah, I feel better about the water that I'm drinking.
awesome. Well, so for anyone who listens to this, please don't spend weeks like I did. You can take all this as the research that has been very much done, and, you don't need to buy the $5,000, Kagan whatever alkaline system, and I particularly have used the past, several years this, like, water drop system, Amazon, like, days of the discounts, it's like a few $100s and it's like a full system and the water tastes really good, which is important when you feel all gross from chemo, tongue and mouth and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. Because yes, I've noticed that as a very common side effect that people say the water tastes more metallic or they're more sensitive to any off flavors in the water. And that could be a good investment to have maybe more neutral tasting water so that you'll drink. Very important when you're going through cancer
Yeah.
treatment.
And if not, also, if you don't do anything, I don't think that your water's gonna murder you the way that I felt that it would when you're originally going through so much and you're in
Yeah.
such a susceptible place, to wanna do everything that you can, and sometimes you're not supposed to do everything. And so I think that's the perfect segue to my next question because we were messaging on Instagram about this where, I've struggled with a lot of inflammation and, uh turmeric is something that's oftentimes recommended for that, but then you were mentioning about how sometimes it's not or too much of it, and so I'd love for you to elaborate on that.
Yeah, turmeric has really gained a lot of popularity because, yes, in cell culture and animal studies, they have shown that it could reduce markers of inflammation. And so, yes, so inflammation is definitely a byproduct of cancer treatments, and inflammation can lead to cancer. So, it really took off in popularity. And we've also seen a rise now in liver injuries related to herbal supplements. And through this analysis, they identified that a turmeric was a very common one that was contributing to liver injuries. Why? In the U.S., dietary supplements they are regulated, but not in a way that drugs are. So there's no requirement of them testing that their supplements are pure, that they don't have excess doses that could lead to liver damage. And so it really is a buyer beware. And some people may not recognize that. I've seen there's a popular hair growth supplement that has turmeric in it. And then some people might be taking turmeric from an anti inflammatory blend. And then that starts to add up over time. And that is something that the liver has to deal with. And you need your liver.
Yeah.
If you identify that damage early, it could be reversible. But there can be cases where it's gotten through a stage where you've caused permanent liver damage.
Wow.
So yeah, turmeric through food, although when I posted that, people are like, "Oh, but I use turmeric in my food." That's not what we're concerned about. It's these supplements that are using very high doses. They often add an other ingredient from pepper, black pepper, that actually increases the absorption of the turmeric. So, yes, it increases absorption, but that also increases the risk of toxicity. Women taking tamoxifen should especially avoid turmeric that has been shown to interact with the metabolism of tamoxifen. So it can't
Oh,
interfere with
wow.
the metabolism of drugs. Mhm.
Great, yeah, great ad there. I'm not hormone positive, but I know a lot of my friends are, and I would have never thought of that. So a lot of it is that it's excess. Like it's not the turmeric itself, it's that we're taking too much of it or taking things that are absorbing it too much into our
Yeah,
liver.
right. You end up with these very high doses, and these doses, like more is not better. Just like your treatments are calculated in a range that's going to provide benefit but not cause too much damage. Same thing's going to go for anything natural as well. It doesn't mean more is better. More could cause harm. And when patients are coming to me with these types of supplements, I ask what they're taking them for. So if it's turmeric and they're taking it because they heard it reduces inflammation, I try to discuss, have we addressed everything that you can do that doesn't require a supplement that can reduce inflammation? Have you limited your added sugars, your processed foods? Are you being physically active? Are you eating enough fiber? How are you supporting your gut health? Yeah, let's focus on these big pillars so that you don't have to rely or think that this supplement is going to provide that benefit. You're getting it from your pillars of your health.
Amazing. And so kinda I'm picturing my head in between this. It's like the supplement side and then like normal food side. And then where does like turmeric shots or like juicing fall into that? Does
That
that
would
count as food or does that count as
From
too
my
much?
understanding of how they're typically made is through like a little bit of turmeric root that gets juiced along with ginger, for example. And so you're still in a food form. Like often these turmeric supplements have actually just extracted the uh, active compound in turmeric, and it's just that plus the black pepper that improves its absorption. There's also like proprietary products that have isolated this particular compound, just delivered that high amount of that compound versus turmeric, you're eating, the food.
Okay, so, like, have it like, I know a lot of, friends in general and then fellow cancer thrivers oftentimes, have, like, a turmeric shot every morning with ginger or something, like, is that okay to do, or can you overdo it on that too?
That's a good question. I think one thing to monitor if you are going through cancer treatment, if you look at your comprehensive metabolic panel, there's usually measures of liver function in there, your AST, your ALT. If you start noticing some trends there, that might be a sign like, and I've done this with patients, is as we start to see that liver function values start to change, like, okay, let's lay off some of these supplements that you were a little unsure about to see if that.
And it's pretty wild to think about just because, when I was initially diagnosed and I was stage 4 de novo, I mean, my liver was filled with cancer. And so when you think about a lot of this stuff, like kind of reverting back to your liver, it's like while you're trying to make yourself better, it's actually you're causing like risk to the area that you're trying to make
Yeah.
better.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good point. When I have individuals with liver mets, we really focus on how we can support liver function because it's also what's regulating your blood glucose levels. It's making lipids, it's making hormone. It's got so many functions in the body. And if it's compromised because there's tumors in there and inflammation, we really have to take extra care around what you're eating and how you're eating.
That's great. I really wish you worked for our government. But moving on.
Yeah. Yeah.
um What are some of, like, the main supplements that might be misunderstood? One thing that I thought of, because I would get a lot of lists, like, general lists from people whose friends went through chemo of all the supplements they took, and in hindsight, that's super dangerous, right? Because
Mhm.
we'd be on different treatments. The one that really sticks out to me is, like, vitamin C, because I know that sometimes that can be good, and then sometimes that totally can, like, be counterproductive for chemo. So kinda starting with that, but stuff that you might see and why it can be dangerous or misunderstood.
Yeah. So vitamin C, I'll kind of group that along. Well, one thing with vitamin C is yes, it's an antioxidant. Times of illness where there's a little bit more inflammation, you go through vitamin C a little bit faster, but you don't need to superdose of it. It's actually been shown we can only absorb a certain amount. The rest that doesn't get needed gets urinated out, and we can't significantly increase our vitamin C levels in the blood through supplementation. Um, and large amounts of vitamin C could also cause some stomach upset. Typically, it's recommended that those are undergoing radiation to avoid high dose antioxidant supplements. And that would include things like vitamin C, vitamin E. I know there's these antioxidant blends out there. And the reason why is that one of the mechanisms that radiation helps damage cancer cells is that it you know, causes radiation. There's going to be oxidative stress, and antioxidants can quench some of that oxidative stress, so then less damage happens to these cells. So that is the concern that if you have too much of these super doses of antioxidants, you might actually be protecting the cancer cells, right? You don't get to say antioxidants only go to healthy cells and don't go into the cancer cells. Unfortunately, they're all exposed to that same environment. So that's one.
That's crazy, right? Because the narrative is so much like, "This fights cancer cells, this and that."
Yeah.
Like, the idea that you might be unintentionally protecting the cells you're trying to eliminate is wild, really.
It is, and, like, we don't know enough. In one, study that was done, and this is specifically in head and neck cancer patients, they were given an antioxidant supplement, and they did do better during treatment, but they had a higher risk of recurrence later. So the concern was there actually some protection of these cells during the treatment, and those that were more resistant, right, had a little bit more protection, were able to come back. Now, this is just a theory, but it did raise some concerns about, maybe antioxidant supplements we need to be more cautious about when going through some particular therapies. Chemotherapy, your liver is helping metabolize these things to get them out. Sometimes your liver needs to metabolize it to get it into the active form, for example. When you take supplements, your liver also is dealing with those supplements. Sometimes the compounds could potentially interfere with the activity of those drug metabolizing enzymes. So it could cause them to work faster or slower, or large amounts could actually induce some damage to your liver. So, again, it depends on the supplement, but the concern is that we don't have enough information to know, okay, you're on this therapy. Here's the ones that are going to work. Here are the ones that are going to be dangerous. A lot of it is still kind of unknown. So, really, when we're talking about supplements, it should be supplementing the diet. What can you not get from food that you need that we can strategically supplement? So, a common one in a lot of patients I work with, I highly encourage them to get their vitamin D tested. This is my own
That was a
analysis,
big issue for me, yeah.
yeah, of my patients, as I've seen. I'd estimate probably 75 to 80% of my patients being low on vitamin D,
Wow,
and that's
yeah.
not a real statistical data point, just something I've noticed in my own patients. So then we'll supplement with vitamin D, um, in this case. Or if someone's having a lot of difficulty eating and they're losing weight, then we might need a multivitamin that doesn't have excessive amounts. But the main takeaway I'd like for people to understand again is that in the US, dietary supplements do not have to be tested for purity, safety, or efficacy before they're out on the market. So you are taking a chance when you purchase them. Just because they're sold at your drugstore does not mean that they are the same safety level or have the same level of rigor of testing as your medications do.
That's a great takeaway, and, I mean, my that just, like, it keeps reinforcing in my mind the idea that, like, I mean, regardless if you have cancer or not, or, like, it's so individual, so, like, taking the time to find a dietitian to speak to and to make things specific to you before just, like, going on a bender of supplements is important. One question on it, because I've talked about this forever. I used to own a gym, and I really, stress to people that, protein powders, supplements, they're not regulated. But they can be regulated, right? So like I know like Thorne Nutrition, I'm totally blanking on the regulation, that they is it
Oh, yeah. So
NSF certified?
yeah, so some companies can do third party testing, meaning they pay for a company, they send out their sample, and the company does testing and verifies this has what it says it has, and you don't have any other contaminants in here. You're labeling this correctly, and that's what it does. So that's optional, and the companies do have to pay for it. NSF is a common one. There's also Informed Sport, which is common in protein powders because you think of like athletes. There's been cases of unintentional doping because they've taken products that have had
Yes.
contaminants in there. So they look for these supplements that have been third party tested so that they can verify that there's no contaminants in there.
Yeah, definitely. I remember, this was years ago, actually, during the time that I did own my gym. So it was like 6 years ago. And there's a big thing with vegan proteins having a lot of metals in them if they weren't tested because the soils and other aspects. So it always kind of stuck in my mind. And then I've noticed, particularly Thorn as an example, because I'll buy a lot through them, or like a lot of these companies might charge extra for the ones that are NSF certified, which makes like, I understand because they're paying extra, right, for that testing, and, like, is that something that you would pick every time because of that testing, or,
Yeah,
you know
personally, I do take some dietary supplements. I have a protein powder that I utilize occasionally, and I use third party tested. So USP is another one that's commonly used on supplements. I look for that. And again, with the protein powders, that they NSF is a very common one that I look for. So I use supplements when they're necessary, and I will pay extra to know that this was something that was third party tested.
Mm.
Also, I get them from the manufacturer themselves, or going to the grocery store, which I know they purchased it from the manufacturer, because there was also a big issue with contaminated or counterfeit supplements being sold on Amazon. So Amazon's trying to crack down on this, requiring
Yeah.
third party certification of their products because there was a lot of counterfeit products being sold.
Wow, that's really good to know, and it just adds to, like, Wow, it's so hard for us, right? Like we started off talking about, these articles and misinformation. I describe that as sending someone homework. Like I so appreciate that people care and are on the lookout for stuff that might advance in my type of cancer, but like if someone just sends me a text with an article, it's like giving me homework that I have to read it, figure out if it's legit, all this kind of stuff. And I admittedly usually wait for you or Dr. Toplinsky to post about it, and that's what I take as, my stamp of approval or not. But, like, when you think about that barrier, then the specific barrier where something might be really good for one person, not another, then your different, scenarios, and then once you've narrowed it down, like, "Oh, vitamin D insufficient," and then you end up ordering a counterfeit one off of Amazon, so I think, if you streamline it, I don't think it's as intimidating in the sense that, like, speak to a professional, figure out what you need to do. I know that when my vitamin D was very much too low, my oncologist was able to prescribe me, a higher dose of vitamin D that I took weekly until it was back to where it should
Mhm.
be in a maintenance. So, a lot of this stuff, you don't have to figure it out from random people. You actually can, really get quicker answers, and I think our time is really valuable, and it's much easier on our time to just get the right thing in our health.
I completely agree. It's like when you think about, okay, I have to read through this article and dig through this information and find the right supplement to take and uh, weed through what's correct or not to invest that time and money. Like I said, you read a headline, like, okay, I got to go get this supplement. Oh, I got to get this one now. And I've had patients that are spending hundreds of dollars a month on supplements. And then we sit down and talk about, okay, you don't need this, you're doing well on this. That money could be better invested in that time with a professional. Maybe you're having difficulty with physical activity, paying for a trainer, your copays for appointments, and that time for maybe some meal planning services that can help support your nutrition. So that's where I really spend a lot of time on explaining the risks of supplements because I want people to see that that money could be better invested into something that we have evidence does support your health care, your physical activity, your nutrition, maybe even your sleep, mental health support, all of these pillars that you can divert that attention to.
I think that's a great point with there's financial risk. Like, not only are you potentially risking health, but like, and there's so many components that if you just take that time in the big picture, you'll be healthier and you'll probably save money, significantly, most likely. Okay, the other thing that popped up because of you saying that is I was blown away once I was diagnosed, about soy.
Hmm.
So I just, we've gone through, I think, different phases as a society of like, soy's great, soy's terrible, I would love if you wouldn't mind addressing, like, is soy good or bad for us, and should we be having it?
Great. So soy is a very common one that has a lot of myths in relation to breast cancer. And the concern was because soy does have these compounds, they're called isoflavones. They're in the family of phytoestrogen, so they have a very similar structure to estrogen. So I hate that name because then people think they're estrogen. I've had people tell me, well, soy has estrogen. So no, it does not have estrogen. It has a compound that looks very similar, but it does not act the same way. But the concern was because there are some animal studies that gave high amounts of these particular isoflavones or isolated soy product and found that it promoted breast cancer growth for estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. And so that raised a lot of concern. Well, again, we can't extrapolate what's found in animal studies to what is it like when people eat the food, actual food. So we're talking about tofu, edamame, soy milk, a tempeh, foods. Okay. And what we've seen in populations is that soy consumption actually lowers the risk of breast cancer. Asian
That is
population.
just mind blowing. Like when I found that out early on, and it's still like I still need to kind of ask because it's so counterintuitive to like how we were programmed.
Yeah. So although they have a similar structure, kind of do a little molecular talk here.
Yeah.
Major estrogen receptors, we have estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta. Our estradiol binds to each of those equally. They've shown that the soy isoflavones tend to bind more to the estrogen receptor beta. And binding to that estrogen receptor actually leads to a signaling cascade that reduces cell growth, actually has anti cancer. So it's regulating cell growth. So it's actually been shown to, well, if that fits in the pocket of that estrogen receptor, that could actually be protecting the breast cell, right, from growing and becoming cancerous. And again, yeah, at high doses, though, we could end up getting it binding to estrogen receptor alpha and causing growth. But that's high doses, isolated compounds, not what we're seeing in food. And when we think
Yeah.
about, well, what's in soy foods, we've got protein, we have fiber, some have calcium in them, other minerals that are essential for health. So, yeah, it's protective. Actually shown to reduce breast cancer growth. And then I get asked, well, what about if I have cancer? Then that must be dangerous. Right? There's actually been studies that have looked at soy consumption post breast cancer diagnosis and have found that there is reduced risk of breast cancer recurrence, breast cancer related mortality, and all cause mortality at higher soy consumption. So, quite the opposite of what's really been the myth going around that soy is not safe.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and explaining it so well because it's that really threw me off. Not only because it's one thing for something to just not be dangerous or like, yeah, I always thought estrogen was in soy too. That's why men shouldn't have it more. And then women, it gives you too much estrogen. And it's just completely false. But not only is it like, oh, it's fine to have soy, it's like, oh no, actually, it's good for you. Um, and I think that I was originally advised, like, 2 to 3 servings of soy a day. Is that
Yes. Yep,
accurate?
that's the recommendation, about 2 servings a day. So 2 servings would a serving is half a cup of tofu, 1 cup of soy milk, as an example. So you can have a couple of servings of that a day. We see in Asian populations, they're consuming about 30 to 50 milligrams of isoflavones per day. That's about the equivalent of 2 servings. In the US, we're getting about 2 to 3 milligrams per day. So very little soy consumption in this country. And so, where we've seen the benefits on reducing initial breast cancer risk has been in these populations that have consumed soy for a long time. But then, when we look at, again, in our populations, soy consumption after diagnosis tends to be protective. And not only for cancer, but also lowering the risk of osteoporotic fractures, um, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. So it really is interesting how so much fear can revolve around a food. You're like, but the data shows quite the opposite. But there's always a new villain in the world that everyone's got to try to jump on because it's just the way our brains work. We get attracted to negative information and fear and grabs people's attention. So even if that is unfounded fear, it gets people to look.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of, like, the explosion, of peanut allergies, which you've, like, because everyone was so afraid of it that they weren't exposed to it early, and, like, more right? That was the thing that unrelated to this, but it's just, I was a new mom when I was diagnosed, and that was something, like, very early on. I gave my daughter, like, Bombas, peanut butter puffs or things to check her allergies. But, yeah, we hear these things all the time that kinda steer us maybe in the wrong direction. What I'll say too from personal experience on a non-medical or science side, but I still, find tofu helpful in what I mentioned earlier when, like, your mouth feels depending on the treatment, sometimes the mouth feels, like, sandpapery or it feels kinda slimy or dry. And sometimes it's like, other proteins and foods that I like for a few days might be harsh in my mouth. And so I'll definitely tofu's a great one that I find really like more soothing.
Yeah. And again, that's a good example of how when we have these unnecessary fears, it starts cutting away at your options. And when we hear the carbs are bad, then people are cutting out fruit and then they're scared of soy. Then you've cut out that whole food group and animal proteins. And then what are you left with? Nibbling on broccoli, I guess. But even then, I saw someone scaring people about broccoli and spinach. So nothing's safe. Uh,
No.
world of misinformation, and kind of back on when we talked about that conspiracy about people thinking of pharma, they're just trying to make money. The wellness industry makes more money than the pharmaceutical industry. There is a lot of money to be made in supplements and protocols and books than drugs. And so we need to have that same level of skepticism on these people that are selling you fear.
100%. That's the line for me. The wellness industry does make more money than the pharmaceutical industry. That doesn't mean that all things are good or bad on both sides. Like, it's that we need to take the time to do what we're talking about, but also, like, doing a complete 180 is gonna cause the same issues that people have with big pharma now, in a lot of ways, right? And then it might even be dangerous. And so just I think it's just so important that we continue to not only question things, but utilize people throughout. Like we have, a primary care doctor regularly to like check our vitals and other things. And I think that we don't do that the same way with nutrition, for the most part, or we don't look to make it something that's, as scheduled out. It's more like, here's something new I learned about through this video. It made sense. And a lot of times currently, it sounds like I've seen, and I think you can verify of like a lot of things are stated as fact and they're cited, and the studies do not exist. Or the studies were about something totally different. And most people are not going to go check those studies. And frankly, I don't want to go check those studies. I always explain how, like, I love my oncologist, Dr. Marla Lipsick-Sharf at UCLA, and it's, my initial oncologist I didn't like. I didn't trust her, and so every time I would get information, I would call the people that I trusted, like other, family and friends in the medical field. And in my treatment now, well, I still might, update my friends and family, like, and I don't take everything as gospel, but like my oncologist is the first to say, like, I don't know everything, right? Like
Mhm.
none of us do. We don't have a crystal ball, but like here's the options, here's what I would recommend. And I don't feel like I have to question every single move. And that's where I feel like on a lot of general things, like I was just, how I was saying earlier about following you and Dr. Chaplinsky for a lot of information too. I don't feel like I have to question everything that you're saying because I know these values and how you run your practice and the experience that you have. And so I think like make life as easy on us as possible. You don't need a million people's recommendations. Narrow it down to the people who you really trust.
Oh, well, I appreciate you saying that I'm on that list. And I think that's a beautiful message. It's like this, you got to build out a healthcare team that you trust and go to the experts, vet them out. This is your health and your life. And I know that takes some extra work, and sometimes you don't have access to all of these resources. I totally recognize that. But know that there, unfortunately, are people that are taking advantage of this vulnerable population at a vulnerable time in your life. So
Yeah.
don't take everything for face value, and unless you have someone that you truly trust.
Absolutely. And what I will say to that too is a little plug here because this is the We Got This podcast. If you go to our resource directory, it actually can filter by financial assistance or like it's all other nonprofits and additional free services and help that you can access. So if anyone's like, they're not in network and I really want to see them, but it's, a few $100s to be able to go in. Like, I really stress getting second opinions or seeing the doctor that you need, and if you do need that assistance, go to wegotthis.org, the resource directory, there's filters there, and you can go under financial, and I know that a lot of great nonprofits will help with those kinds of things, so I think that's
Yes.
important.
Oh, that's a great thing to put together. 'Cause that's also a whole search on its own of trying to find other resources available. But yes, there's nonprofits all over the country. Here in Austin, we have a nonprofit focused on integrative oncology, so providing free or reduced cost acupuncture and exercise
Oh,
classes,
yeah.
and all of this. And we call it integrative oncology. And people recognize that these are things that can be done alongside your treatment. There's cancer centers now that are starting to offer these services because they're seeing the value in this. So I still remain hopeful that integrative oncology will truly be more integrated so that patients don't have to be jetting all over the place to get that whole person support that they need.
Yeah, I love that. I always tell people my oncologist recommends my acupuncturist, and I actually had done acupuncture for a long time. As a kid, I was diagnosed really young with endometriosis, had a lot of chronic pain, and then I did it for fertility and other stuff. And it's like it doesn't have to be an or thing; it can be an and thing. We can do more than one thing. But yeah, I love that. And if maybe I'll hit you up after this actually. I'd love to if you take a look at the resource directory, let me know, some of maybe the more local to you too that I just wouldn't have known of yet. We're continually adding. We have about 100 resources on there already. And as we continue to add them, you'll see there's just a really vast amount of filters you can put on to find exactly what you need. So I think it's so important because I got like that copy paper when I was diagnosed and you know, I have it still actually, but I never really fully used it. My husband was, like, hyperventilating. We just found out I had stage 4 cancer, and, yeah, we just wanna make sure to be a resource for all that good stuff. So what I was thinking we could do is we could end it here with, a few rapid fire debunking questions that Katie, our awesome social media manager, pulled from our community. So the first one here is collagen. Is it for everyone, yes or no?
Oh.
Is that might be a more in-depth question?
I think you don't need it. You don't
Okay.
need it.
Do greens powders actually replace vegetables?
No.
Are they good for you? Should you be worried about greens powders?
I'll say that they vary in their quality and what's in them. So if you want to do greens, make sure that's all that's in there. Again, big market out there. They,
And with supplements and all of
they're
this?
going to be in the supplement category.
Okay, great. Is it true that sugar feeds cancer?
Yes, but that's not a rapid fire question. Again, have a whole podcast episode on
I know, these are actually
right. But yes, they do, but it's not as simple as if you cut out carbs, it's going to starve cancer.
Okay, awesome. So, well, as I left you with like quick hit questions that are really longer hit questions, anyone who listens to this and wants to go into more depth on that, definitely, shoot us a message. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Cancer Nutrition HQ. My podcast is Cancer Nutrition HQ. I'm available on all platforms, and my website is cancernutritionhq.com.
Awesome. And as you just mentioned, a lot of these things that we talked about, you've done such a great job at showing on your Instagram, now podcast format. I think, us being able to absorb quality content and information in different ways makes it so much more accessible for everyone. So if you guys have any additional questions, hit up Dr. Z. And definitely feel free to reach out to us if there's more that you want to see on the We Got This podcast and resources and all that good stuff. So, thank you so much for your time. I feel like I got spoiled because I asked a lot of the questions I wanted. But
Your
I have a
questions
feeling
answered a
that
lot of people's questions.
many people out there
Yeah.
can relate. Yeah. So, well, great seeing you as always. And we will be talking soon. And,
Thank you.
of course, can't reiterate enough that cancer does indeed suck, but together we got this.
We got this.